Darwin's name became associated with popular evolutionary ideas such as missing links with increasing regularity.
No! His ideas were linked to more stuff after his work became popularised? Say it ain't so, Calvin! Hello lovely people, welcome back to my channel, welcome if you are new. My name is Emma, and today we are going to be horrified. I say we, that's assuming you too are an evolutionist. Obviously in reality, nobody's an evolutionist because that's a made-up thing. Answers in Genesis, real quick, in case you're not familiar, kind of does what it says on the tin. Regrettably, it's a charitable organisation. They're entirely dedicated to debunking evolution. They believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible, specifically the King James Version, go figure. Therefore, they believe the Earth was created in a week, so were all the animals and shit they were just put down in a day, and therefore evolution can't be real. So what they do, they have these real-life venues, and they have a number of prominent fundamentalists working for them. You probably know of Ken Ham. Tim Chafee is one of my personal favourites. What they do is they spend their time manipulating science to poke holes in specific parts of the theory of evolution. They point out the gaps, the unknowns in the theory, and say, see, evolution can't be real, therefore God. Their entire shtick is God by default. So this video is called Warning Evolutionists, This Will Horrify You. And I expect the title to be accurate because most of what Answers in Genesis does horrifies me. Their videos are they're all so clickbaitly titled. So we're going to watch this video. As an evolutionist, I am excited to hear what on earth they're going to say. Before we dive in, I have two announcements. This video is not sponsored, it is just me plugging my own shit. You ready for a bombshell? I have a brand new channel. It's called Emma Thorne Extra. It's essentially a vlogging / dump. I'm not selling it very well. It's my everything else channel. So I've got, this channel is for skeptic-based content, it's for reaction videos, it's for, research, interviews, everything you expect to find on this channel in this kind of sphere. I've got my gaming channel specifically for gaming. I wanted somewhere to be able to talk about just other stuff. Books, cosplay, so I just made a new channel. There is already an introductory video on there where I also opened some lovely PO Box stuff, so you can go and check that out. There will be a new video over there tomorrow. The second thing, this is less an announcement, I'm just kind of warning you in advance, I guess. Next week, there will be another Answers in Genesis video, because this will become clear eventually and I will be vindicated because I talked about wanting to do this on a video from my other channel that will come out soon. I planned to, for the Christmas season, one of the things I wanted to talk about was the origins of Christmas, the pagan origins, the Roman origins, because we talk about how trees are pagan, but people don't generally know much more than that, and I think it's super interesting. I also think that the early Christian church's approach to celebrating the birthdays of martyrs, including Jesus, which is to not celebrate them, is something that is not widely known, but is really interesting. So I'd planned to do that just as like a solo research video. In the time between this Evolutionist This Will Horrify You video being released 2 weeks ago, in the time between me seeing this and deciding to film this video, and then going to the Answers in Genesis channel, they have released a video about how Christmas is pagan in origin, asking if Christians should celebrate it. Like, I can't ignore that. That's the perfect vehicle. That's exactly the question that I want to ask and answer is it a Christian celebration? Spoiler alert, my feeling is that everyone should be allowed to celebrate it because it is largely a secular holiday now, because I'm boring and think inclusivity is fun. So depending on what their video actually is like, it will either be a tiny bit Answers in Genesis and a lot of my own presentation, or it'll be another reacting to Answers in Genesis video, so I'm sorry in advance. And yeah, go check out Emma Thorne Extra, subscribe over there. I know this is the longest video introduction ever, I'm so sorry. I have one more thing. There is a new tier over on my Patreon, Colossal Quakka. The first new thing is that Giant Chickens and the new Colossal Quackers will get access to a monthly hangout stream every month on a different day and time so that people can, it won't always be at the time that you're at work or whatever. People can come hang out, we'll do a Q&A, I'll talk about what's going on that month, and every month I will post in advance of that the things that I'm going to touch on so people can ask questions. If they know they're not going to be there, they can ask questions in advance. For anyone in Colossal Quackers, the new tier, you will get a little handwritten postcard saying thank you from me, and then I plan to do some seasonal postcards, because I think snail mail is cute. So you can check out Emma Thorne videos on Patreon, check out Emma Thorne Extra for more free content on YouTube. I'm done plugging myself. Let's listen to Answers in Genesis and cry. Here we go. Warning evolutionists, this will horrify you. This is recommended 13 plus parental guidance. I wonder why.
Examples of so-called links between humans and their supposed animal heritage had appeared prior to Darwin's primary publications, and the cruel and racist attitudes such ideas produced took.
Ooh, that is such an AiG staple. Evolution is racist, because historic Christianity and fundamentalism has no racist issues. There's no racist past or present there.
Took a fearful toll on some of the unfortunate people involved in the.
I can't see this guy's name because it's hidden behind the all episodes available on Answers.tv. Calvin Smith? It looks like Calvin Smith. He's the host of Creation Basics. Through working with young people inside the church and with a small group at the University of Guelph. Guelph? That might not be right. Calvin personally witnessed the devastation brought by the teaching of evolutionary rationalism. The devastation of rationalism. They're literally anti-rationalism. You can't make this shit up.
Julia Pastrana was exhibited on Broadway in New York's Gothic Hall. She was originally billed as a marvelous hybrid or bear woman and noted as a semi-human being, somewhat between a human being and an orangutan, by George C.D. Odell, the theater chronicler. She was described as follows: the eyes of this lusus natura, in Latin literally a sport of nature, a freak, mute.
Alright, let's look up Julia. Julia Pastrana had hypertrichosis, which is excessive hair growth anywhere on the body. No idea what this has to do with evolution. Let's see if he gets to it.
Mutant or monster. Beams with intelligence, while its jaws, jagged fangs, and ears are terrifically hideous. Nearly its whole frame is coated with long, glossy hair. Its voice is...
She's apparently a singer and performer, hence its voice is harmonious. Take this with a pinch of salt. Obviously, Calvin is right in what he's suggesting, that this is a horrific way to talk about a person. People running freak shows weren't scientists or naturalists at the forefront of evolution. They were just using people who had, in this case, physical differences to generate shock. So yes, it's disgusting to read about this woman who was clearly a talented singer and performer talked about and described in such inhuman terms, talking about her as an it and things like that. It's disgusting. I don't understand what this has to do with evolution. It's interesting. I think this kind of history is really fascinating, especially because so many of history's freaks, for want of a better term, are just people with conditions that we now completely understand, or that we now understand very well. Things that are today better known and therefore quite normal, and we would never dream, or at least most people would never dream of othering somebody who just has hypertrichosis. That's really interesting. I don't know what it has to do with evolution.
Pastrana was of Mexican Indian descent and born hirsute, with her entire body covered in thick black hair. Her jaws and teeth were also unusually prominent. She would be described as baboon lady, ape woman, and the ugliest woman in the world in advertisements and commentaries made for her performances, in which she sang and danced for the masses. Today, she would be described medically as suffering from polytrichosis, and thus influenced hundreds of thousands of average people towards a belief in a supposed animalistic origin for not only her, but the entire history of humankind.
Is he suggesting that the existence of people with this hair growth condition is why people believe in goes some way to why people believe in evolution? Do they just have a big wheel in the AiG headquarters that they spin? And it's just like a series of random words, and they spin it a few times and put some words together, and then they just Google shit until they can tangentially relate it to evolution? Because this feels bizarre, right?
Interestingly, the Bible describes an example of someone who seemed to have an abnormal amount of hair as well. But Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man."
Smooth
Genesis
boy.
27, verse 11. Jacob impersonates his hairy older twin by dressing in Esau's clothes and covering his own hands and the nape of his neck with hairy goatskins. Fooled by the ruse, Isaac is tricked into giving the younger son the blessing of the firstborn.
It's such a funny story as well because, like, the parents realize the deception and they're just like, well, tough shit, Esau. Like, I gave him the blessing. There's nothing I can do now. Can't take it back. Like, Genesis is so weird. Honestly, if you haven't read it just for a laugh, please do. It is actually one of my favourite books of the Bible just because it's such nonsense. It's such joyful nonsense. It really is.
Such a specific description may indicate a scriptural example of someone already suffering some type of abnormality, such as male hirsutism or hypertrichosis. The number of references demonstrating the attempt to position...
Again, fascinating. It is interesting. Whether you believe Genesis is literal history and fact or not, that's a very old text, and it could potentially be referencing somebody in ancient times with this disorder. That's interesting. That's a really interesting thing to do a discussion about. Why is that got to be put in this video, placed in opposition to evolution? It boggles the mind.
Pastrana as a missing link or ape-like throwback is quite prolific, and high-level evolutionist scientists of the day used her condition to promote evolutionary belief.
Scientists of the 1800s who didn't have an understanding of this medical condition were mistaken. Clearly everything they believed was wrong. We can't trust that the sky is blue or that water is wet, because scientists of the 1800s who believed some wrong things also thought those things. In before some smart ass in the comments starts to tell me that water isn't wet, water makes things wet. I know, I was making a point, okay? And subscribe and please like the video. I'm just joking around with you. I'm just joking, thanks.
Here are just a few examples. Ernst Haeckel, infamous for his forged embryo drawings used to falsely promote evolution in textbooks for over 100 years, described Pastrana as an ape-like human that represented a higher stage of development than the long-nosed apes in his...
Let's talk about, I was going to say historic science, but I think actually in academia this is still kind of common. Academia was very, I want to say combative. That's not the adjective I'm looking for, but it was there was a lot of infighting. A lot of it was a race to be the first to figure out X, Y, and Z. And thus there was a lot of cheating, stealing of ideas. There are a lot of dodgy scientists. There are a lot of dodgy scientists doing dodgy things to get ahead of their competition. Competitive is the word that I wanted. I just want to let you know that I'm recording this video off the back of a 24-hour live stream on Twitch. So if I'm a little bit more thick than usual, I do apologise. There's a whole history of us fucking measuring people's skulls to try and determine intelligence and worth. Science, at its core, at its aim, should be independent and objective. Science in reality, because scientists are people, and through history a lot of prominent scientists were wealthy white dudes trying to get ahead. Yeah, there was a lot of bullshit. There's so much historic racism in science, like, Calvin's not wrong about that. Look at the history of how medicine has treated women. There are still fringe groups using super racist historical science to promote, like, white supremacy. Science is done by people, and people, a lot of the time, are shit. It doesn't mean that everything any scientist has ever believed is bullshit. Something that fundamentalists would complain about, possibly rightly, is that a lot of people are, say, biased against Christianity because of Christianity's historic oppression of people, because of its historic actions, or because of certain figures within Christianity that, say, give the religion a bad name. That's exactly what they're doing here, not just for evolution, but for all of science. This scientist was stupid and wrong, and some of them were racist. Yeah. That doesn't mean that all science as a result has to be discounted. It means that we trust a lot more in modern science. It means that we have to work really hard to make sure modern science is objective. This is part of the reason, in my opinion, it is important to diversify scientific fields. It's much easier for different fields of science to be racist if everyone studying is white. It's much easier for scientific fields to be sexist if everyone studying it is male. That's just an unfortunate part of the human condition. Especially if you're going back to the 1800s, or this chap's from the early 1900s, we have a much better understanding of science now than we did then. Because time has passed and we've done a lot more research. He's not really said, and he's not really made any point yet. I feel like he's just trying to get us to infer that science is untrustworthy, and evolution specifically is untrustworthy because of scientists from the 1800s being really horrible about a woman with a medical condition. All we should infer from that is that that was an unknown medical condition that we now know a lot more about, and people were more horrible. It kind of goes without saying.
Charles Darwin himself described Pastrana as gorilla-like evidence of the assortment of genetic variation found in humans that natural selection could select from. And the overtly racist The Living Races of Mankind, which was considered a standard anthropological text in 1902, contained a photograph of Pastrana used in certain American racist publications, claiming her an example of a hybrid between a black person and an ape.
Oh my god, they were racist. At least Calvin and I agree that racism is bad? I'm just not sure what he's trying to make of this.
Anthropologist Richard Milner, author of the Encyclopedia of Evolution, Humanity's Search for Its Origins, stated, Julia Pastrana was a throwback to an ape-like stage of humanity. Pastrana's story of exploitation is indeed a sad one that seemed to have no boundaries. Her husband and manager, Theodore Lent, arranged for performances both during her life and after her and their infant son's death, because both suffered from similar...
Okay, I understand why this had a 13+ warning on it now. It is actually pretty tragic. This would be so... If it didn't have this title, Warning Evolutionists, anti-evolutionist clickbait, and it wasn't framed as anti-evolution somehow, again, he's not really said anything or made any points yet, this would be a really interesting video. It's about the exploitation of an indigenous woman, it's about racism, it's about limited medical knowledge, bigotry in science. This would be a really fascinating topic. Based on what he said so far, and we're halfway through this video now, based on what he said so far, which is very little, and what I know of Answers in Genesis' perspective, he's just using this poor woman's story to be like, see, evolution's what racists thought, so waste of time.
Similar diseases. He arranged their embalming to allow their bodies to be exhibited and entice audiences whenever he could find venues that would allow it. Incredibly, the general public's appetite for such grotesque displays was not limited just to the Victorians and early 20th century parishioners. The sad fact is that such dehumanizing shows continued long after any excuse that these examples of missing links were anything other than suffering people had been.
Basically, a couple of scientists of the time, of the late 1800s, said she's ape-like in appearance and could be an example of, what did Darwin say? Something like it could be an example of genetic diversity through natural selection. Because a couple of scientists said that doesn't mean that it was all about evolution. It wasn't. Most of these, especially the images he's showing now, they weren't presented as missing links. They were presented as freaks and dehumanized, like he said, and it's really, really horrible. But it's just not about evolution. I find it ironic and really distasteful that Calvin here is rightly criticizing freak shows and public interest of the past for treating people so badly, for dehumanizing them for what are just medical conditions, genetic conditions. But he's using them just as cruelly, well, maybe not just as cruelly, but he's using them, in my opinion, in a cruel way to prove some point about evolution being false and Genesis being literally true. Think about what Answers in Genesis is actually for, what the purpose of this channel, the purpose of this organization is. It's about proving that Genesis, and by extension the entire Bible, is literal fact that it's 100% true, it's the word of God, it's divinely inspired by God. How does that really relate to people of the past being mistreated for their medical conditions? They don't go together even remotely. He's just taken the fact that a couple of scientists who believed in evolution said some nasty things, and everyone said nasty things, and therefore evolution is for nasty people. Answers in Genesis run a museum called the Creation Museum, and they have a big sort of exhibit plaque in their museum about how evolution is racist. Like, this is a huge point for them, and it's completely, again, it's difficult because this is an important conversation to have, it's a valid conversation to have, and it's really interesting and good to learn where some of these horrible things came from. They're just using historic racism and cruelty and dehumanization of innocent people as a gotcha for atheists, evolutionists. And I just think that's fucking horrible. I just think that's really cruel. These topics deserve to be in the spotlight. They deserve to be talked about. I'll try and find some less biased sources discussing this kind of thing and throw them down below so that you can read more if you're interested, because I definitely am, and I think this is, like I say, this is really valuable. It's just framing it as a ha-ha, therefore if you believe in evolution you're a horrible person. It's fucking stupid as well as mean. Kind of think this guy's an idiot.
And despite the scientific and medical community's understanding of this, Priscilla, the monkey girl, with advertising asking, was Darwin right? Did man evolve from ape? Toured the United States as recently.
Right, so when fucking super homophobic, racist Christian groups do horrible things in the name of God, does that mean no one should believe in God because only horrible people believe in God? Like, that's exactly the same inference. That would be a stupid thing to say, right? Because this group of white supremacists in the USA believes in God. Everyone who believes in God is horrible. And then I could throw a picture of them on the screen and a quote that says, in the name of God, fuck you, black people, or whatever, you know. I'm being vague on purpose. But, like, that's exactly what we're doing here. It's like somebody was like, look at this woman. Did she evolve from an ape? That's not evolutionary science. That's a freak show trying to generate interest to make money exploiting this woman. It fucking sucks. But it doesn't disprove the theory of evolution.
It's entirely reasonable to assume that if Pastrana had been perceived as fully human, created in the image of God, and simply a victim of a sin-cursed world, she and her son's remains would never have been allowed to be displayed for profit like animals.
Ah, so if everyone believed in God, this would never have happened. You know, a lot of those scientists at the time would have been Christian. Part of the reason that evolution was so controversial at the time was that science and faith were seen to go hand in hand. Most scientists, at least at the start of that period, were religious, particularly Christian.
Human, created in the image of God, and simply a victim of a sin-cursed world. She and her son's remains would never...
A victim of a sin-cursed world is a kind of funny way of saying a victim of God, because if everyone was made in the image of God and created as he intended, so was she. Why did he do that? Why did he let that happen?
Once his seminal work was published, popularized, and iconized within the more atheistic and anti-biblical intellects of his day, Darwin's name became associated with popular evolutionary ideas such as missing links with increasing regularity.
No! His ideas were linked to more stuff after his work became popularized? Say it ain't so, Calvin!
And a well-known example.
This is, again, really tragic. I'm gonna skim through because we don't need to have another poor woman's story used to no end, for no purpose other than to say, ha, evolution bad, evolutionists very mean and stinky. This sucks, okay? This sucks.
As evolutionary ideas continued to grow among the scientific and lay communities, missing link exhibits in sideshows became more and more commonplace. Naturalistic ideas of man's origins were disseminated first among the scientific elite and then among the general public through such exhibits.
And yet, Calvin, as the world has become less religious and more rational, it has also become kinder. At an increasingly rapid rate, we put laws and rights in place to protect people from this kind of exploitation. And that is despite most of the people in charge of changing those sort of things being rational and generally believing in evolution. If this was simply the result of the popularization of evolution, which now all but only the most irrational people, such as Answers in Genesis and their crew, believe in, surely the exploitation would be worse than ever. And yet, there is more in place to protect people from this kind of exploitation than ever before. Why would that be? The world's not gotten more biblical. There are fewer literalists than ever before. And yet we treat people so much better than we did in the 1800s. What's your explanation?
And once popularized, they were then used by scientists as observable examples of human evolution. And this created an ideological cycle of cross-promotion that bolstered belief in more naturalistic ideas of man's origins among all strata of society, in clear contradiction of the plain reading of God's Word.
And there we have it, the crux of the actual problem. The more people believe in evolution, the more people accept science and rationality, the fewer people believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible. And that's a big problem. It's a big problem for Calvin. That was it. He got to the meat of what he was actually trying to say in the last 10 seconds, I want to say. Unfucking-leavable. Were you horrified? I mean, again, in a different way than I expected, that did horrify me. Because, if nothing else, I will say this for Calvin, that successfully shone a light on a very disgusting period of history regarding the treatment of, and I think it's interesting that so many of those were women as well, regarding the treatment of people who were just different. Had absolutely fuck all to do with evolution, except for some greedy, horrible, and probably racist scientists using people in freak shows to be like, oh, see, maybe ape people look like this. Therefore, we shouldn't believe in evolution. That's literally what Calvin's saying. We shouldn't believe in evolution because scientists in the past were shitty people. Well, some Christians today are shitty people, Calvin. So if that's your reasoning, you should fucking hand in your Bible and join secular society with the rest of us. Maybe embrace a little rationality. I do enjoy that this video featured somebody from Answers in Genesis actually just outright saying that rationality is bad because it stops people believing in God, or it stops people believing in the literal interpretation of the Bible, which is true, and thank God. There you go. That was, what was that? Let me know what you thought down below. I don't even know what to say about this. I could never have predicted what that was going to be. It was interesting. It was interesting. Thank you so much for watching. Like I say, do leave your thoughts down below. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Next week on Skeptical Saturday, we will be talking about the origins of Christmas, which I'm pretty excited about. I love this time of year. Do go check out Emma Thorne Extra if you are interested. Give the channel a little subscribe. Let me know what kind of things you'd like to see over there. Before we go, I would like to give a big thank you and a shout out to my giant chickens and my colossal quackers over on Patreon. Have yourselves a very lovely week, and I will see you really soon.